So, welcome everybody, and for all of you that are out there, I hope you're all doing well and everyone's keeping well. Today, I'm delighted again, as ever, because I've got my colleague Alosa and Emma with me, and I've got Kim from Healthy Minds and Kirsty from North Point, who runs, I believe, the Transition Project. Kirsty, I wonder if you could all introduce yourself. Kirsty, could we start with you?
Course, yeah. So my name's Kirsty Longbottom. I work for the Open Minds Partnership, and I am currently the mental health practitioner attached to the Transition Support Project.
Excellent. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Of course. So it's a project that was set up sort of the back end of last year, that's funded by the Department of Health and match funded by the CCG. It is on offer to all the primary schools in Calderdale, and it is to support Year 5 and Year 6 through transition. So a lot of that is the transition from Year 6 to high school, but we're also aware that Year 5 to Year 6 is quite a big transition as well. So there's 4 different providers. There's myself for North Point, there is Noah's Ark, Healthy Minds and Bernardo's. And we all do and offer slightly different things. So you'll know yourself, Noah's Ark offer sort of one-to-one counselling, whereas Healthy Minds offer group workshops, and then Bernardo's offer work with LGBTQ. And then I'm available for consultations within the school. I also provide training for staff and workshops for parents. And I was also hoping to do group work with classes around anxiety and the SATs, and also around transition. But due to COVID, we've had to make quite a few changes. But that in a nutshell is really kind of what's on offer.
Wow, that is phenomenal. That really is phenomenal. What a wonderful range. We're very blessed here in Calderdale, I think. Hats off to our funders. We're very blessed to have all of that. What a buffet. How wonderful. So guys, Kim, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do, and then maybe we can move on to Alosa and Emma.
Yeah. So my name's Kim. So I work for Healthy Minds. The project is called Time Out. So we work with 10 to 19 years old, inside school and out. So we do a mixture. But we do work on the transition project for years 5 and 6, although we do quite a lot of work in year 7 in secondary school, which I feel is part of that work that we focus on now a bit more as well. So we kind of connect with the young people, but also with volunteers, because we have young people that volunteer with us. So we're kind of doing a slightly different approach to perhaps what Kirsty's doing, because we co-produce a lot of our material with the young people that have lived experience of some of the mental health issues that we are then teaching about. But we work hand in hand together, but we don't work with the teaching staff, it's just the pupils that we work with.
Oh, Kim, that sounds excellent. All right, and Alosa, do you want to tell a bit about what Noah's Ark does and how we are involved?
Yeah, so my name's Alosa. I'm Therapeutic Services Manager at Noah's Ark, and we're blessed well to be part of this transition support project, supporting children through that transition period. And we have our sort of team of counsellors that go into primary schools to work on a one-to-one basis with year 5 and year 6 pupils. Because of the current climate, we're also going to be looking at year 7, because some of those year 6 children have had a difficult transition, haven't they? And we'll be talking about some of that today. So yeah, it's one-to-one. They get a sort of short block of sessions, but they focus on really what's important to that child. It's very child-centered. They might be having all sorts of different problems, but often it's those problems that then make transition difficult. So it's about boosting their confidence, boosting their resilience, their problem solving, their emotional literacy, that communication with others and relationship building. So boosting all of those aspects with that individual child to make sure that the transition is more successful, really. Yeah, and we've got a lovely team of counsellors at Noah's Ark that go into primary schools, and we're building good relationships with those schools as well. It's a wonderful extension to the work we've been doing with children more increasingly at Noah's Ark. So it's it's very exciting.
Oh, that's amazing. And that leads me on to Emma, who is one of our wonderful counsellors and is involved with all sorts. Aren't you, Emma? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and so on? And yeah.
Yes, my name's Emma. Like Natalie says, I'm a counsellor at the Noah's Ark Centre. I go into schools and work with children in both primary school and secondary schools, doing some one-to-one work with them using therapeutic play and relational therapy. I'm also part of the ASD team at Noah's Ark, and that involves a lot around transitions and really struggling with transition and going into different years at school, but also from primary to secondary school as well. So I do work with transitions there.
Yes. Wow. So what a brilliant wealth of experience. Brilliant. So I wonder, I've just been thinking about transition, and it took me back. It's a while now, I have to say, but it took me back. It just, how different it might be when we went to high school and what kids face today. And gosh, it's such a huge step, isn't it? And high schools can be so much bigger. It's so daunting. There's all sort of what ifs. Will I make friends? Will I fit in? Am I ready? So many challenges. What sort of comes to mind, and what do you think some of those things, those difficulties are to navigate? And by the way, I'm Natalie. I'm the Young Person's Counselling Coordinator at Noah's Ark. I always forget to introduce myself because I'm so all my lovely guests. But what are some of the things that come up for us when we think about transition, and what are some of the difficulties?
Well, I'll pick up, Natalie, from what you were saying, just coming to my mind then, thinking about expectations, because you took me right back then when you said, I'm thinking right back to, when we went to high school. And I remember, I grew up in this area, and I remember we were told as year sixers, I think, by our peers, those who had already gone and moved ahead of us, and the rumbles went through the year group, oh, when you go to high school, you get your head flushed down the toilet. That was the that's the phrase that came to mind that you were saying. That was the phrase that really rumbled around. That's what will happen to you at high school. So it just makes you think about the expectations that, and maybe things that we don't even know about that kids talk about nowadays. I don't know, what their expectations are of school. They'll be exciting, but they'll also be daunting, won't they?
Of course.
I know one of my children, I think when they were even still upper end of primary school, used to be scared of teenage. She said, I'm quite scared of teenage. She's a teenager now, but teenagers were ready to that age. So it's daunting, I think, is the word that's coming to mind there for me, Natalie.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It's and expectations. I mean, you can just feel the pressure, can't you? Expectations of self, expectations of parents, expectations of teachers, and not to mention expectations of peers. Massive. Kirsty, could you enlighten us and tell us some of the things that you've come across and some of the challenges that we anticipate that young people might feel going to high school?
Yeah, of course. I mean, sort of some of the things that I've been dealing with sort of within the group stuff is children realising that they all feel similar. So realising that they're not on their own when they're feeling anxious about getting to school or remembering to pack the bag. That seems to be quite a big one. Also kind of, will I be in the same form as my friends? Will I still see them at lunchtime? And then you've got the size of the building. am I going to find where I need to be? I need to know where the toilets are, and I need to know where the dinner hall is. Those are my big things. And am I going to get there? And then added to that, what if I'm late to class? So I think there's a lot around the expectations and around the different rules. So primary school feels a lot more protected, whereas you then enter this huge secondary school where the expectation is that you arrive on time, you're dressed as you should be dressed, and you've got your bag with all your things packed. So when I kind of speak to parents and I speak to young people, a lot of it's around starting to become independent. It's for children to build that resilience and that self-esteem that they can do things for themselves and be successful doing it. Because if they know when they start in September that actually they're quite organised and they can pack a bag and they can get the clothes that they've done, it makes them feel so much more able to face it. And I think myself as a parent, I've got a 14-year-old, so it's not long since I've been through this. A lot of it was getting him to a point where he felt organised and a bit more independent, because you go from that lovely little cotton wool environment to out there on your own.
Wow. Oh, Kirsty, you've said so many things there. I'm just thinking, yes, it's so true, isn't it? So many what ifs, and there's this real sense of, oh, it's time to grow up now. We're going to big school. It's really time to, pull up your socks, grow up, leave your childish ways behind you. You're going off to the big school where the big kids are. And it's, I'm just feeling my heart. It's a huge step, isn't it? But I love what you said about resilience, making sure that those just packing your bag, making sure you're feeling more in control, I guess, is so helpful. It's so, so good. Wow. And Kim, what are some of the things that you've come across, and what are some of the anxieties that might be lurking?
It's making me just think, sorry, I can hear someone asking me something in the background. Sorry about the extra noise. I've lost my thread now.
I was just asking you about, what do you think?
Really sorry. Yes, you can.
No problem.
Bye. Sorry.
Hi.
Edit. Yeah, so I'm just thinking about how I feel as a parent within that as well, and having a child going to school, and perhaps the last one moving up, and knowing that's the end of an era in a lot of ways, and that maybe it's me not wanting my son to kind of grow up, but he's ready, but I'm not. So it's interesting how it's a different sort of situation depending on your family dynamics, isn't it, and the age of your children and that kind of thing. But I guess one of the things I was thinking about the pressure and the getting ready and remembering everything, whether we're physically putting pressure on as parents, or it comes from school, or just them knowing that they've got to remember so much stuff. I think the added dimension that comes up quite a lot for me is the families that are separated, and how, if they don't live in the same place, so that it's not always a walk to school, it's a different way to get to and from school. And it's remembering to take the PE kit when you're at your dad's to get home, and forgetting a sock and getting punished for it, and that pressure. I think that's come through a lot with my own children, but also perhaps with the young people that I've worked with, that they feel that they're doing the best they can, but they can't remember everything. And sometimes the parents forget that. That's not a criticism on the parents, it's just that we just keep going, don't we? And it's like, actually, that's quite a big ask, isn't it, going to high school and having 2 houses and a school. So I think sometimes it's just chatting through that, and perhaps there isn't a solution, but it's just knowing that we need to sort of take it easy on the kids, whether we're with them as an adult parent or working with them. It's kind of going, yeah, actually there's a lot going on without all of the other worries that they're carrying. So I think that's quite a big one.
Oh, Kim, I could not agree with you more. Just thinking about some of the clients I've spoken to, it's such a big thing, isn't it? Feeling that you've got to take your stuff and go to dads, go to moms, or go to mom and dad, another dad, or mom, another mom, or wherever your houses are. It can be so complicated, and then having to drag all your stuff, the frustration of not having everything you need sometimes. Can't agree with you more. It's so much, it's so many anxieties around that, for sure. It just adds to the mix, doesn't it? Just adds to everyone's frustrations as well, and just feeling out of control again. It just, yeah, adds to the anxiety. Emma, you nodding. What have you come across?
I'm just thinking about image and fitting in. I think at primary school, they've all grown up together as a class. They've moved through school as a class, and some children are different. Well, all children are different, but the ones that sort of might stand out for being a lot more different in secondary school are much more accepted by their peers at primary school. If you've got a child that sits under the table instead of at the chair, that child is accepted for that, and the other children sort of protect that child a little bit, I think, at primary school, and they sort of are taught more to understand different additional needs of those children, and they become part of that group, and they become nurtured by the other children. And then when they're going up to secondary school, often they feel that they don't fit in because it's not as nurturing. They're in different groups. They're not all in one class all the time. It's harder to build those relationships. And I think for all children, I think going through primary school, they're not thinking of their image. They're thinking that they're a child, and they're playing and they're learning and they're getting on with their peers or fighting with their peers, whatever they're doing. They're not thinking so much about image until they go up to secondary school, and then mixing with older children and young people that are focused more on that. And it's a whole new world, isn't it, to see that they need to dress a certain way or behave a certain way or use certain language even, or children who wouldn't have normally misbehaved in lessons misbehaving so that they can fit in and trying to protecting themselves, trying not to be bullied, I think, as well. It's so difficult for them.
Oh, Emma, do you know? And I just thought, yes, it's such a big thing fitting in, isn't it? Because of course you're at that stage in life where that's massive. You're trying to get your independence, as Kirsty was saying, and become more independent. But it's so crucial then that you fit in with your peers, because you're moving away from the family and finding your sort of tribe, if you like. And that's crucial, isn't it? So I just think, what happens to those kids who don't feel like they quite find their tribe initially, or it takes some time, or it takes longer, or maybe they feel like they never quite fit in? You know, my heart goes out to those ones. It can be such a difficult journey, can't it? Yeah. Kirsty, what are your thoughts on that? Do you find that there's a lot of social anxiety, or yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, adolescence is such a difficult time for young people, and one of the main things around that is their peers and their friendships. And I think year 5 and year 6, you've got a lot of falling out. You've got a lot of people finding where they fit within groups, and there's kind of a little bit of the ego going on. And then towards the end of year 6, they kind of have their groups formed a little bit, and they know where they sit. And then suddenly they're taken from being the big fish in the little pond to being the little fish in the big pond. And sometimes there's a lot that goes on in year 7 as people find where they fit, because they might be used to being sort of, I don't know, very popular in year 6, and then suddenly there's more popular children in year 7, and that's difficult socially to kind of come to terms with. So, I mean, there's lots of evidence out there that shows for the first sort of 6 months in year 7, there's not much academic stuff kind of happens, because children are fighting so hard to find their place and find their group and fit in and settle down, that's their main focus.
Wow. Do you know, it's just such a huge adjustment for someone. I'm just thinking, you're absolutely right. You know, for those kids that have done so well, even whether it be academically or they've been particularly really popular, it's a whole reorganization of the terrain, really, and it can really knock a young person's self-esteem if they suddenly find themselves, like you say, a small fish in a much bigger pond. Yeah, and then I was thinking, but for other kids who it may be a fresh start, who haven't had such a good experience perhaps at primary school, and now they get to reinvent themselves in a sense as well. So I don't know, it could go, yeah, very interesting. You're nodding, Elo. So what were you sort of thinking?
I was thinking, I lost I lost the volume on my thing a bit, so I missed a bit of what you were saying. But I was thinking about that fresh start, so I picked up a bit there. The fresh starts idea, and I think sometimes if your children have had a bit of difficulty maybe in primary school, because I think like Kirsty was saying, year 5 and 6 can be quite difficult, and you've also been with the same children for. Potentially, if you've stayed in the same school, you've been with them for what feels like a lifetime to some kids, and they're desperate to go to high school maybe and sort of branch out and have new opportunities and new friendships to make, and different teachers to see, and I think sometimes that as parents it can be quite a selling point, I think, for children, that that you're going to have a fresh start. This is a new opportunity, different different people and friends to meet and activities to do and such. I wonder, I mean, as we talk about all this, school is going to be very different, isn't it, for year 7 this time around? They're going to be in much smaller groups, so they may have a bubble. It might be their form, or it might be their year group, might be part of their year group, however the school's kind of managing it. But you wonder how that will, how will they take that on in terms of that kind of fitting in element, that socialization, like Kirsty was talking about, that first 6 months trying to find your tribe and trying to find who you fit in with, who you want to fit in with. Am I popular? Do I want to be popular? All those questions that, actually, it's quite pressured being the popular one. Maybe I don't want to be the popular one. All those things will be really scaled down potentially, because their school environment will be the children that they're able to socialise with. They won't be able to maybe socialise with the whole year group, perhaps. So that's quite a big thing for secondary school, I'm thinking. It's like a continuation of primary, but with a new class potentially. Okay, they'll probably have different teachers, which is a good thing. They'll have a mixture of teachers. And then you'll find for some children, maybe it'll be better. Emma was talking about those with, with difficulties for which a smaller setting is more conducive to their socialization and learning. And maybe that'll be really good for them, because people will be able to get to know them and get to know their needs, and maybe they'll be able to communicate their needs better with the peers around them, because it's a small setting. I mean, I know kids as well, they really, in that year 7, however resilient I think they are, it's quite a thing to come to terms with that whole it's like I've described it often at Noah's Ark. I know I've described it a lot to parents over the phone. Just remember, school's a bit of a jungle. It's a real jungle there. It's like the bell rings off to the next lesson. They all come bustling out, and they're mingling all around and knocking each other and to the next place. And have they still got their shoe? And have they still the girls with this, and some. However resilient you are, I think that will knock them, and some may find it exciting, and some might just find it really, really scary. But that challenge won't be there for them this time, because that's been, so it'll either be really maybe good for some kids, because it's like they don't have that level, they don't have that heightened anxiety to face. And then for others, it may make the whole experience a little less exciting, possibly, a little less challenging, perhaps, or I don't know. I think it will be a very different experience for year 7s than what it has been, and it'll be interesting to know. Well, do schools find it works better, or are they harkening back to when it was different,
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It all feels a little bit like a sort of a large-scale social experiment, doesn't it? We're not quite sure how it's gonna all pan out, really, and maybe we will, with the gift of hindsight, look back and think, oh yeah. But you're absolutely right. And there's something, as you were saying, I was just thinking, Alosa, it doesn't feel settled either, because yet there's still, you're doing this change, you're going to high school, you're doing this transition, whatever that looks like, but yet that's not the way it necessarily will always be, and there may be some more change on the horizon, sort of moving back to normal at some point, if that, we don't know. But yeah, it all feels a bit unsettled, and it's hard enough anyway, isn't it? Gosh. Kim, what are your thoughts? What is going through your mind as you're listening to this?
Yeah, it's just, you visualize yourself in that corridor, don't you? And I'm already thinking that sounds a really nice way for schools to be. But I guess from like what you said, Alosa, it's kind of like it will suit some and not others. So whichever the way that it is in school, some people are going to like it, others aren't. But I guess it's just about the new normal, and there might be lots of new normals along the way. But it kind of feels like this is a stepping stone in maybe the right direction. And it may be that our work shifts and changes around that. It may be that we tend to do more work. I say we, as in Healthy Minds might then connect more with, say, Kirsty, to do more stuff with the teachers and less with the year sevens. It's we'll just have to shift and change to kind of suit the need, really, of each school, because I think each school will probably have its own difficulties and issues. So it's not one kind of thing that fits all schools. So it'll be really interesting to see what things are kind of thrown up. But the idea of perhaps them, because they haven't really had that clear ending of primary school, it feels like maybe this new beginning will kind of blur some boundaries and maybe will be okay for a bit. But there's not that definition of, yay, we've ended, and we're starting, or it's just a bit more, it feels maybe more of a smoother transition in some ways. But they've kind of missed out on perhaps ending their primary school in some respects. But I was also thinking, when you were talking, Alosa, it's about middle schools, and I know they don't really exist so much. I did go to middle school for part of my education, and so did my daughters for a little bit. And it feels very much like that. Although the class sizes were bigger, that felt like a stepping stone, because it was a smaller space, and I felt that they've developed and changed and matured in a way that perhaps they might not have done because of that. Could have been the school as well. So yeah, I'm quite excited about the way that things are moving forward, but then you just don't know what other things are going to come from this at the moment. So it's it's an interesting time. We can kind of preempt lots of things, but actually we don't know. So yeah, it's an interesting way to think of things.
Yes, absolutely. And I just think we have to be like, like Alosa often says, the bigger, wiser. I'm just so aware of the challenges, and just so aware of having to hold things perhaps more patiently, and just be that more sensitive, because it is difficult, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult anyway without all of these complications. Gosh. And Emma, what do you think? Or do you think that your kids that you see will find it harder under these circumstances, or do you think for some of them it might be a bit easier?
I think it's very mixed. I think it's going to be very difficult because they've had such a long time off, and
Yes.
I think a lot of them are going to find it very difficult to even get back to school at all. I think it's going to be really difficult to get them back in. Some of them will be fine, but I think once they're there, I think they'll find it easier. I think it's much more rigid, much more regimented. I think smaller groups, like you said earlier, it is much easier for them to navigate. Quieter corridors, smaller groups, they're not going to be touched, they're not going to be bumped into, which often it hurts them. They've such high sensory issues that often someone brushing past them, actually it hurts, and it panics them, and that can send them off for the rest of the day. Then so I think, and the rules surrounding it, they often just really like those rules. It's safe, it's contained, the fact that they're told when they're allowed to go to the toilet, when they're allowed to do this. Someone's got to go with them to the toilet. I've heard. I don't know whether this is true in all schools, but in some schools they've got someone on that, so everything can be clean and everything can be tidy afterwards. Even the cleanliness of everything often is huge for the children that I work with. I think they'll be much happier with it. However, getting them there after this time off, it's the unknown for them, isn't it? They can't see at this point that it will be better. They're just saying, no, I don't want to go. I'm not going. It's too much. I'm not going. But actually, it's getting them to sort of try and see, which is where it's good that there's been transition days and they've been allowed to go in and see what's happening and what everything's going to look like. I think that's been great for the kids that I work with, to get them to take away a little bit of the element of that unknown, because that's awful for everybody. I think that not knowing what you're going back to. So yeah, I think it's going to be mixed for them, but in the long run, I think. But then it's not the long run, is it? It's when does it change again, and when's that bit taken away from them? And it's just uncertain, isn't it, for them?
Yes. Gosh, who knew we'd ever be having these conversations? But yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying, Emma. You know, just that for some it will just be like we can live this way going forward. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, Kirsty, what do you think? Do you think there will be some challenges in getting kids back to school, especially those that have got anxiety or those that are perhaps didn't want to go to school in the first place anyway? You know, or some resistance to going to school. Do you think it's going to be quite challenging getting them engaged?
I do, definitely. And I think schools are going to have to provide as much individualised support as they can, because each child will have different challenges for them. You know, the children that would normally go back to school after a holiday with no problems, potentially there's going to be more anxiety, because there's anxiety around COVID. Will I get it? How am I going to protect my mum at home? You know, what happens in the classroom, what happens in the dining room. So they're going to be going in with more anxiety anyway. I think one of the worries for me, I was on the task and finish group for the guide for educational settings, and one of the worries for me is that we don't put all anxiety in like a COVID pot, if you know what I mean. So I think that every anxiety is related to what's happened within COVID, because a lot of these children would have had some anxiety anyway. And I think it's picking that out as well. You know, some children will be anxious about a dining room with a lot of people in. That's not necessarily because they think they're going to catch COVID because of social distancing. That needs working with individually with that child. And that does worry me a little bit. And going back to what Emma was saying, obviously it's going to be very mixed. Some children will work much better with what's happening at the minute, but then are we going to have a group of young people who face the other transition issues at a later date? So those children who, for maybe year 7, the corridors have been quiet, the groups have been smaller, is there going to come a point where it's revert to normal, and then those young people are maybe in year 8 or year 9, and then have to face what school has been like?
Yes. Oh, Kirsty, you said it, individual, and I think you're so right. It's going to come down to each child's individual needs, and we need to be careful, don't we, that we don't just group it all together of, it's a COVID issue. Absolutely. I thought that was such a valid point there. I mean, does it help? I did wonder about this, because I think it's a bit of a, it can go either way, but, you know, does it help if you've got older siblings in high school? You know, do they make it easier, or does it come with complications? I wondered what you thought, what your thoughts were about that. Is there some mileage in that?
I mean, I've definitely got some experience in that. I do have a child going to high school now, and then he does have older siblings. So I think there is something in knowing, and if it's been okay, I think that's the thing. Has it been okay for your older siblings? If things have been okay, then then you view this, the expectation is that this is the natural course of events. This is what I would have been doing. They've always known that this is, it's not an it reduces that feeling of the unknown, I think. And I think that's if it's been okay. But in lots of families, it may, the experience of high school may not have been okay for their older siblings, and therefore they are then tainted maybe, or their experience is something, they've got that transferred kind of experience maybe of their siblings, maybe even of their parents. And now we're going into something a little bit more psychotherapeutic, that notion that, you know, parents' experience of high school and their experience of transition, and whether they transfer some of that onto their children, and what it's back to expectations again, isn't it? You know, and if parents watching this, I'd just, maybe just have that experience, that idea of look back and think, was going to high school for me an exciting time? Was it a daunting time? Was I scared? All that feelings, you know, what did I feel? And and just be careful that you're not putting those onto your child's experience, or putting the older siblings' experience onto the one that's going now. And it's going back to that individual, I guess, look. And as Kirsty was saying, you know, that remember that your child that's going now is an individual, and they will have their own challenges and feelings around their move to high school, you know. But I think that sibling thing, they do have this preparation. I know that, you know, I was thinking back about that getting independent, and, you know, they maybe have more scope to try on the uniform or play with the tie, you know. So I think things like that, you know, taking time to fiddle around with the tie before you if you've got to do, I mean, some just have a clip, don't they? But if you've got to do your tie, practice it, fiddle around, play with it, the older sibling can do it for you. So they do have those kind of experiences, and I think for an only child it can be maybe harder to and maybe harder because they are shoved in amongst people again. It's that people rubbing up against each other, isn't it? If you've got siblings, they're always rubbing up against each other, so you're always experiencing that, the positives of relationship, but maybe the conflict that's in relationship as well. And I think I'm just going to that point as well about schools. And you mentioned, you know, that bigger, wiser, stronger kind of thing that, you know, we often say, and we've been saying in these discussions, and also we've been saying a lot, oh, it's all unknown, there's so much unknown, and, you know, that's been coming up in every discussion, is uncertainty attached to it. But I feel quite, as a parent, I think, and just as somebody that's had, you know, in a professional capacity, contact with schools, I feel quite confident. And I think sometimes you have to put your trust in other people as part of relationship, isn't it? You have to feel quite, you have to put some trust in that place that's going to look after your child. Otherwise, you're kind of lost then, aren't you? And there is a sense, I feel quite confident that schools they're doing their best in the uncertain environment that we're in to provide the young people with as much certainty that they can, you know. And if they can tell them what their plans are, that this is how we want it to be like, and this is how we're aiming for it to be like, and this is what our vision is, this is what our picture is, and, you know, we know things might change, and but we are still planning for you, we are still looking out for you, and we are still looking to see how it's going to be best. And I get the feeling that is very much what schools are doing amidst a very stressful time. So I really do think they're really doing pretty good, really, to do the best they can. And I think as parents and as I don't know, young people, I feel quite trusting in that, you know. There's something about relationship you've got to trust, haven't you? And hit that hearing. And I think for parents, I'm going back to Ian's point he made before in the last week's discussion we had, that if you're not getting all those things that you want maybe from school, maybe it is about asking them, well, what is their vision for September? If there's a nervous, you know, I bet schools' emails are still in play. You know, I bet people can still contact schools to some extent. You know, particularly those where they're vulnerable, or you know, children with special needs and those kind of, and they will have already had contact, I'm sure, with schools. But there is that, you know, it is okay to ask, what do you think, or ask other parents, how do you think this is? What do you think this is all about? How do you see this working? But there's a lot of individual differences, I think, coming up across the board in people's opinions about a lot of things with this, these circumstances.
Yes. Oh, do you know, I really like what you said there, Alos, about, you know, having confidence, because if you as a parent don't have confidence, then that's gonna, kids pick up on stuff, don't they? They so do. I mean, let's not underestimate that. They pick up on everything a lot more than we think. And I think there's something about, you know, lending them that potency and giving that air of confidence. Yeah, definitely giving them that security as well. But yeah, from teachers' point of view, I mean, this is not what they signed up for, and a stellar job. I mean, to teachers out there just doing a very difficult job in very difficult circumstances. Kirsty, what is your feeling on the ground? What do you what sort of feelings do you get from schools? And I mean, are they hopeful, and are they coping in this difficult time?
I think some of the teachers that I've spoken to just feel a little bit that their roles change, maybe beyond their sort of capability. So I think there's that feeling that they're doing a bit of social work along with the teaching, and I think they feel more at risk themselves, because often they're making contact to a home, or they might be dropping food parcels at a home, which is something they wouldn't usually do. And I think that's making teachers feel a little bit uneasy. And I think as well, we have to remember that, yes, they have their holidays, but some of the teachers have worked through those holidays. So, you know, we have to be careful that they're not going to burn out, because they're still having contact with children and families during the holidays to make sure that things are going okay. And that's very different. You know, usually sort of the Easter holidays, they'll come to the end, and then they'll have a break. There'll be some children they think about, because we're all the same. You still take something home, but they get a break and they get to refresh, and then they get to come back, and they've missed that. And I think there's a lot of hope for September, and I think the teachers are excited to get back to see their children, because it's a bit of a kind of a grieving thing, isn't it? You go from seeing them every day to suddenly not seeing them for, what are we on, like 12, 13, 14 weeks, and another 6 or 7 to go. So there's that excitement there, and I totally get that, because I can't wait to be back in schools with groups of kids. So that's there, but there's, you know, we need to make sure that the teachers are still resting and they're looking after their own health, and all those things, so that they're not sort of at really.
Yeah. Oh, do you know, I get such a sense of just self-care, like you say, and just watching out for each other, not burning out. Gosh, they do amazing, don't they? And they go into this profession because they care, and it's almost like, yeah, they give and give. And to any teachers out there, just, yeah, self-care. And thank you. You're just doing an amazing job, and we're so grateful and so thankful for that, for you teachers and everyone in the teaching profession. I mean, at the end of the day, we do trust our kids to you guys, and what a huge responsibility. Wow. Yeah, not easy, Kirsty, not easy, but what an amazing job they're doing. So yeah, I was just aware of the time. As always, it just flies by when we talk like this. I was just thinking of any sort of thoughts before we go, just to kind of, maybe for parents, or, you know, maybe for teenagers, or any tips, or just sort of leave it, you know, thoughts as we leave today, and any thoughts around sort of ideas about how to make this transition easier, if that's possible. Kirsty, could you give us any sort of tips before we go? Any thoughts around what we can do to make this easier during this difficult time?
I think for me, it's looking after each other. So parents looking after the children thinking this could be hard for mum and dad. I think it's very much us recognising and accepting our own anxieties, and ensuring that we don't reflect those onto our children that might be moving up. And I think it's just use what's out there. We're all trying to put things on different sort of electronic remits so that they're accessible to children and to parents. And my hope is that they use them, because, you know, between us, there's so much information out there. There's written information for those that learn better like that. There's audio, there's video. So we're trying to be as inclusive as we can, and kind of give as much for people to engage in. Within the project, we're just in the process of uploading information for parents, teachers and young people onto the Open Minds website. And all of us as providers are going to kind of upload things. So I'm just hoping that it's accessed, because it's there, and we're trying to be as fluid and as flexible as we can be, to give that support without being able to do that face to face.
That is so good, Kirsty, and what an amazing job, you know, and it's so important just having that support and having access to it, isn't it? Just makes everyone feel safe and just more held. It's wonderful, just wonderful that we've got this in Calderdale. And Kim, any thoughts before we go? Anything that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I was just thinking for all of us here, as well as people that we work with, to just perhaps remember about how special some of this time has been. Yes, it's thrown up some difficulties, but I think particularly for me, I've noticed, you know, the pace of life has slowed down. We can't always make life slow down, but maybe we can make sure that we spend time together doing some of those lovely nurturing things. So that's what we can control. So when things are out of our control, maybe it's looking at the little things that we can control that are easy, going for a walk, getting an hour of exercise every day, but together, and exploring, and kind of not forgetting to do that, because I'd hate to think that we'd change back to how things were, and then you kind of like, oh, I want it to be lockdown. And it's like, actually bring some of the good stuff from lockdown into how we are now. And that kind of feeds back to what Kirsty was saying about how we can project onto the, you know, our young people that we're working with, or our own children. And if we're more resilient and are modelling some of those good behaviours, then that's going to have a knock-on effect. So I think that's the bit that we can control, isn't it? By kind of lead by example kind of thing.
Yes. Oh, Kim, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there are lessons to be learned and things that we want to, you know, we're glad will be over, but there are things that we want to take with us into the future. And I love that. And yeah, just taking the time sometimes, and because it's a bit of a false economy sometimes, just all this rushing and, you know, being on the hamster wheel and sort of treadmill through life. So yeah, absolutely. So good. Oh, and Alosa and Emma, any thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I think I'd just echo some of that, and that taking the time. And I think even though the summer holiday doesn't feel maybe the same as holidays would have felt before, you know, families might have gone on longer holidays, places maybe families don't have the same finances, the same opportunity, can't go abroad as easily. You know, some will be doing things like that, but I imagine a vast majority perhaps won't. But it's maybe doing other rituals that mark it as a summer holiday. You know, trying to find things that that break up what we've all just been going through of a weirdness. And because summer holidays are very much family time, aren't they? Even if people are working, parents are working and things, it's a distinct time when there isn't certain pressures. They don't have to check their app to see what work's being set for them. They don't have to make sure they've got things in their bag. Obviously they're not being in school, but you know, that all those things are kind of, it's a pressure-free time. And thinking, make sure that everybody, parents and children and staff, really kind of feel that, so that when it comes to the time in September when things will be potentially more strained on us mentally, that we've kind of had a break and we've had a relaxation and we've rejuvenated in this time.
Yeah. Oh no, that's so good. So good. And Emma, what are your thoughts?
Sort of similar to everybody else, really, and that rejuvenation and that getting the resilience of the children back up so that when they go back in, they're resilient enough to cope with all the change, I think. And I just think understanding the children and understanding that it's stressful and understanding that it's an anxious, unknown time, and doing everything possible to sort of just sit with that with them, really, and not necessarily try and stop them feeling that way, because it's understandable that they do, but sort of like you said earlier, Alosa, if they've got questions, try and find out the answers. That it just takes away that element of unknown, that if it is something that they're really, really worried about and they don't know what's going to happen, maybe just reach out and try and find out, and use sort of the services around that are putting things in place and that are doing things to help. Just utilize that, really, and have a look out there and see what's going on, and see if there's things that could help.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. And it's just kind of encouraged me to think that, yes, there are things out there, and that, you know, as Caledon, we've done a great job of making sure there are resources, so use them. And there's something about just being kinder to each other and just, you know, giving each other a bit of grace as well, because we are living through some extraordinary times, aren't we? So, Kirsty and Kim and Alosa and Emma, thank you again for giving your time once again so graciously. And guys out there, stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you next